ACME would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways of Greater Melbourne, the people of the Kulin Nation, and recognise that ACME is located on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. We also acknowledge First Nations people as the original storytellers of this land, and recognise their significant contribution to the contemporary moving image.
All right, so my name is Shea Rigney, and I certainly did do my Masters of Research with the Western Sydney University, and I am now started my PhD candidacy at the University of Sydney, where I am looking at how to teach teachers to use digital games. So let's begin. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that I am living and working on Gundungra and Durrag land, which is Blue Mountains, and I also work down in Penrith area, which is Durrag, and I also work at the University of Sydney, which is Gadigal. I acknowledge that land was never ceded and that the Indigenous people of Australia were the first teachers, the first educators, and we certainly have a lot to learn from them. So just a quick overview of our session. So today, session 1, a really brief introduction to the theoretical context and the pedagogical justifications. And then I'm going to give you a holistic look at how you actually do embed digital games into units of work. At the end, I'm going to provide some case studies. So Peggy's Post, Deja, and But You Seem Fine. And these are for a range of primary and high school and across key learning areas. Our next session in 2 weeks, which I hope you can join us for, is going to be a bit more practical. It will allow you to start designing your own unit of work and can workshop ideas and think about what it is you need to put in place to actually ensure it is an effective unit. That third session is where you will be coming back again with those unit ideas, hearing from other people who have designed their units of work, and also using this time as a bit of a consultation period. If you are wanting to use today's presentation for your accreditation or your hours, please see the Australian Teaching Standards on the screen there. So a bit of an overview. I do refer to games as digital games as opposed to video games. And the reason I do that is because it encompasses a range of games. So drill games, if we think cool maths games where it's that drill-based games where you're repeating something over and over, even for those of us who remember Mavis Beacon typing, quiz-based games, and these are by far the most popular games that are used. So we have Kahoot, and we also have Look It. We have gamification, and this can be in the way of non-digital and digital, but it normally aligns to having badges, normally aligns to leaderboards and things like that. We also then have our commercial off-the-shelf games, or what are called COTS, and these are things like Assassin's Creed, so on and so forth, that weren't made primarily for educational purposes, but can be used in those settings due to its content. We then have serious games, those games that were designed for an educational basis, and it's not necessarily just at school, but also within businesses also run serious games. And then we have our puzzle-based games. So why should you use digital games? So there are a number of learning theories that actually support it, but these are 2 that I tend to go by. First of all is constructivism, the fact that when students are playing games, they are having to build upon knowledge, prior knowledge and information that they gain from in-game to build their knowledge. Additionally, there's active learning, and you've also got experiential learning, where it is problem-based learning, where it is this hands-on, this ability to take risks in a setting where there's no negative implications if they do fail. There is also a lot of research. There is improvement in motivation amongst some of the studies that are done, or a lot of the studies that are done. Engagement is actually also seen as improving. Improvement in knowledge acquisition. So this is about content. This is about skills. We also have things like improvement in 21st century skills. So our 4 C's, our creativity, our collaboration. We've also got a lot of improvements in collaboration and things like that. Additionally, I want to point out that as educators, we will often go to clips on the internet, we will often go to excerpts from books, we will often go to films, and we will do that so quickly and so readily. But as we can see, video games are actually the biggest data media source that our students will use. And when you have a look at this infographic from the Australia Plays report last year, we can see that in the 15 to 14 and the 15 to 24-year-old age bracket, up to 94% of our students are engaging with this medium. And it provides us an opportunity to use a medium that our students are familiar with and that they enjoy. So, something that I've asked myself since I began this research is what actually is digital game pedagogy? And at the moment in academics and in literature, there's lots of very niche frameworks. So they might look at this is what maths video game pedagogy looks like, or this is what it looks like in English. There is no holistic approach, which is what I'm hoping to achieve, or what I think I've achieved. So digital game pedagogy involves the purposeful selection, curriculum alignment, implementation, and assessment of digital games to achieve specific learning outcomes. It's just like we would not put on a video without having introduction to it, the context. We would have them answer some questions as they go, and then we would have an activity afterwards. So this is the framework that I have used. It was actually created in New South Wales by Erica Southgate and a number of her colleagues, and they did it back in 2017, but didn't really do anything with it, unfortunately. It was made in New South Wales, so it's the Australian context, which is great. And there's 5 specific areas. Now, with the research that I did last year with my master's, there are 2 areas in particular that they did miss. First of all is that cultural understanding. So we know that there are certain games that may have inappropriate representation or stereotypes, and that is something that really needs to be considered, especially as we have one of our cross-curriculum priorities across Australia being Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures. So that certainly needs to be a consideration. We do have the technical context in there. However, we really need to break that down further, because even though we've got that identification of the BYOD, we know that since 2017, there has been a shift in how technology is used or not used in schools. So there are 4 key areas, and I've created a document for you to fill out. So something for you to use as you would plan your units of work. So those technical game details, curriculum and context applications, the learner profile, and the pedagogical strategies and formative assessments you would use. If you would like to access the template now, you can use your phone if you like to access the template. It will be sent out to you, and I've also got some screenshots of it as well as we go. And this template will form the basis of our next workshop, but I thought it was important to run through it to provide some context. So first of all, those technical game details. I also wanted to point out the benefit of using a template like this is if you have a head teacher or an executive that you might need to convince or to demonstrate the pedagogical justification of using games, then this will actually help you do that as well. So not only is it a planning tool, it is a tool to help you demonstrate the pedagogical benefits. Game name, the cost. Now, there are a number of different avenues you can go down in order to access free games. There are games that you can get just on iPad. There are games that you can get on a program called Steam, but that in itself can have some issues. There's considering the school phone ban that has limited the amount of games that students can access, but we also know that some schools do have access to a range of iPads and apps. So whether it's from the Google Play Store or whether it is from the iPhone store, they can be downloaded. And one of the games that I'm going to show you today, which is actually got a debut release tonight, Deja, is available for download. And you would look at it as a text, just like you might buy a physical book, like a picture book. It is investing money into a resource. Also think about the device specification. So does it need to be connected to the internet? Can it be downloaded and that's it? That we know that there are some concerns when a game is required to have that ongoing connection. Is it public access? So will your students be able to be contacted by people from outside the school? Will they be able to communicate with each other within the game itself? Are there any accounts required? Is there a sign-up process? What does that sign-up process look like? What data is collected? Because we know as well at the moment the datification of students and children is something significant that needs to be considered. The critical analysis of the game is really important. And I also must preface and say that before you play any game with your class, you need to have given it at least one really good playthrough. It sounds silly to suggest, but there are instances where people haven't done so, and it can also then make it very difficult. Just like if you were to use a text that you yourself hadn't read, it would pose a number of issues in the classroom. So critical analysis is for you to consider, does it accurately represent the subject matter, whether that's the outcome or the syllabus dot point? Even if it's a no, so if you're thinking historical games like Civilization, you could still use that game with the caveat that you then look at it through an Indigenous perspective. So even if that game doesn't represent it accurately, you have the opportunity to go back and really provide your students the opportunity to engage in that critical understanding. Is it culturally appropriate? If it is a game that includes Indigenous representation, do your research. Have you found out that the game did collaborate with Indigenous communities, or were they actually part of the design team? If they were not, then it is best not to use that game. Accessibility. A lot of games will offer, whether it is captions, closed captions, whether it is different uses of mice or keypads. That is something you need to consider, as well as having a good understanding of your own students. Technical requirements. So within the existing infrastructure of your school, if it is a game that is only available on console, maybe you have to bring in a console that you own, or maybe the school has a console and it is connected to the overhead projector. I would also strongly suggest that any potential issues that you might come across as you're filling out step 1, you think about those preemptive measures that you can indicate to your head teacher or your executive to say, well, this is what we are going to do to do that. Now, next one. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Nicole. Step 2, the curriculum and context applications. This is where you are really making those connections and that explicit understanding and links to the syllabus and the curriculum, as well as the cross-curriculum priorities and the general capabilities. Do understand the outcomes it does address or starts to address. What are some of the skills that you can take from the syllabus that can be applied there? Be really clear about how it does align, and also be clear as to how you are going to have that pre and that post. And I'll show you about that in a second. How long are the students going to play for? Now, if you are teaching English, you can use a game to look over the entire term. It can be the text. It could be a 5-week. Could play once a week over 5 weeks. If, however, you are in a KLA that for secondary where you don't have much time, maybe it's 1 or 2 lessons. If you are a primary teacher, you here have the opportunity to use a game that goes across KLAs and teaching areas. It says there down the bottom about game affordances. And so game affordances are those game elements or those game mechanics that can help with the learning process. And the last case study that I have for you, But You Seem Fine, it is one of the game mechanics in that really demonstrates to students the implications of choice or perceived choice. Step 3, we have the learner profile. How many devices are available? If it is a BYOD school, what devices do they have? If you are a BYOD school where they all have to bring Chromebooks, great, okay. But that also means that they probably can't download anything. But web-based games is what's best for them. If you are a school that says or requires students not to bring devices, or like a primary school where they're asked not to bring devices, how many iPads are available? Are there laptops available? And this can also determine the style of gameplay. Is it going to be one student playing, one person watching? Is it going to be a small group? So the available devices will obviously impact how gameplay occurs within that classroom. Device to student ratio, same thing. Have a think about the implications if you have a school that has minimum access to laptops, and especially around times like NAPLAN, valid, where those devices might be used. You might want a good understanding as well as to the level of gaming experience that your students have. As the data from the Australia Plays report demonstrates, we've got 90 to 94% of our students who play games, but we know there's such a wide variation of games. We've got strategy games, you've got cozy games, you've got puzzle games. So getting a good understanding of their experience with gameplay. There will no doubt be a real mixed level of experience. And what you can do as well, depending on the type and the style of game that you are using in class, you can pair your students up depending on that ability. You may also need to assess the student's ability to play, and also strongly consider your ELAD students and your students with additional learning needs. I will always, in the resources that I create for games, I will always create a glossary, extension tasks, and a step-by-step guide as to the activities they need to do, which is also heavily scaffolded. I would also suggest that, if possible and when needed, teachers model how to gameplay. If it is a complicated game that requires understanding of processes and you have to log prices or you have to log entry, then it is best to be modeled. I've also got down there some differentiation strategy ideas. Again, those work well for your ELAD students and your students with additional needs. Those, again, are normally used within the lesson outlines that I create. The very last step that you use are those pedagogical strategies, and we're about to look at those. You want to think about what is it you are doing before you actually use the game. What are some of those context creating activities and the provision of understanding that students are going to have? During the game, what is your role going to be? Is it a game where you can actually monitor from your laptop? Is it a game where you need to walk around and be with the students and check for understanding? Again, with grouping, is it going to be pairs? Is it going to be individual, small group, or whole class? How are you going to manage their gameplay across the period or across a number of periods? And how is that going to work in your unit of work? How are you going to ensure that you monitor students to ensure that they're learning? What are some of those formative assessment strategies? And they also can lead into those post-game activities. So when you're talking about exit tickets, self-reflection, a yarning circle, peer assessment, these are some of the things that really need to be considered while you are creating that unit of work. I also added down the bottom there some additional considerations. Who do you go to for technical support? Are there any additional games or alternative games that you can use as backup? Do you need to communicate this game or the use of games to parents, to the administration? Do you need specific professional learning, or can you then provide professional learning to your colleagues once you have implemented this game and this unit of work? Here are some of the strategies that I've put together about things that students can do during their gameplay. Students should be collecting some form of data during gameplay. Now, that can be statistical data. We have a game coming up that I'm looking at called Peggy's Post. And within that game, students are actually going to be collecting how they work out their mathematical equations. So collecting statistical data and comparing it at the end to other players. Looking at character and plot development, whether that is graphing the plot development on a plot graph, whether it is making notes or taking screenshots of the character and how they've developed over time, making notes of dialogue that characters have between them or the lack of dialogue, and that real-time note-taking. And when you do activities like this, that's where it is actually good to have students in pairs. One is playing, one is note-taking, and then they can switch roles. Students can also reflect on the experience that they have gained from gameplay. So reflection, and again, that can be in a yarning circle, that can be a discussion afterwards, or it could be a written discussion. Some games are created purely for empathy, and so emotional impact can be used. Decision and choices within games, one of those game mechanics or game affordances, can determine the outcomes of some of the games. And therefore, when the class reflects, they can discuss what their choices were and why they decided to go down that path. Students can also draw. They can draw the landscapes, they can draw the characters, they can draw specific images from the game. They can look at the angles, the depth perception. They can take those screenshots and look at those a bit later on and do an analysis. With working in groups and pairs, they can plan for gameplay iterations. They can discuss the decisions that they had made, and then they can create or solve problems together and then play it again so that they can enact those perceived challenges or the perceived problem solving that they have engaged with. Some other practical strategies around debrief, you can do a mind map or a learning map. A class discussion works well. Comprehension questions that you have done as you play the game. You are writing out these comprehension questions, and at the end of the lesson, they need to answer these comprehension questions. They can compare with their peers as to the experiences they both had. Exit tickets, 3 things they learnt, 2 things that they've discovered, 1 more question they have. You can create a Google form or a Microsoft form, which is easy to do, especially if they're already on devices. Using coloured post-it notes to get them to make comments about whether it's theme, whether it's character, whether it's about specific scientific or mathematical concepts. And like I said, that learning map. Students can also create their own material after gameplay. They can design their own video responses, writing a game review, for example, about one particular element of the game. They can write a report. They can develop a new narrative structure. So one of the games I'm going to be looking at later, the lesson plan outlines that. They can then turn it into a script and turn it into a play. They could write a sequel or a prequel, create spreadsheets from the data collected, and then compare it to other responses. So if you think about all the different pedagogical strategies that you use in your classroom for every other text, whether that is for a book, an excerpt, for a clip, for a movie, you can apply that to digital games. And you should be applying that to digital games because they are a text. They are part of the constellation of resources that you as a teacher can actually use. So here is the first example. So this is a game called Peggy's Post. This is available for free on a platform called itch.io. Now, itch.io is a platform that allows any game developer to upload their game to this site. As you would imagine, it is blocked by the department, but you can actually request from your technical support officer at the school to have that particular game's site unblocked. Now, again, if people want, I can send out, I've given an example of what that letter could look like. So that can also be sent out to people. But this game in particular, I've set a plan for year 5, year 6. However, when I've shared this with in-service teachers before, I've also had people said that this is applicable to year 6 and 7, or 7 and 8, sorry. I just thought it worked best for working mathematically. The purpose of this game is actually to look after a lighthouse post office that you were given from your aunt who has retired or passed away. It wasn't actually quite clear. You have to think about the weights of parcels, the locations of parcels, the different routes that the ship delivers things in. Each day you get a certain allocation of stamps, and each stamp connects to how much something weighs. Now, the initial gameplay can go for 7 days, and in that 7 days you need to make enough money to pay off the debt that was left to you. In my first gameplay, I didn't pay off the debt, and that is where I came to the realization that, okay, there were things that I could have done differently, and this is what your students would be doing as well. So before the gameplay, you will be providing the context to the game, and they would have been doing mathematical operations. So division, multiplication, subtraction. During gameplay, and I'll show you the format that I've got for you, students are in pairs. So you've got one playing, one taking notes, and they are making notes about the decisions that they are making in relation to, are they sending a parcel? Are they waiting to the next day? How much are they charging them? Are they charging them enough? And as they progress through the game, they are collecting the data for each day. Now, after gameplay, they look at their data and they identify where they actually could have improved and where they could have met or paid off their debt. They come up with a strategy and then they do another playthrough. So, for example, if we have a look at these worksheets, you've got here their first attempt. How much money did they earn? How much they spent? What was their running total? You could turn these into landscape and then make that table a bit bigger for them to fill in. But when they reflect at the end of those 7 days, that is for them to really consider what decisions should have been made differently. And that is where that second worksheet, what we learned, came in. As a pair, they are talking about what the decisions they made were good. What did they do that worked well? What they did that didn't work well and how it impacted their gameplay. And then, did they notice any mathematical patterns as they went through? That last prompt, next time we will. So getting them to reflect on their mistakes and planning for future play. And then that second or that third worksheet is about them replaying and identifying their strategy. And hopefully they actually have achieved and they've been able to pay off their debt. And then at the end of gameplay, all the students come back together. You discuss as a class about your working mathematically. They then compare their attempts. They explain how new strategies helped. And I've got there as well a glossary, an example of a glossary for students. So whether it is your ELAD students, whether or not it is for your students who have additional learning needs. So that is Peggy's post, and that is available online for free through a web browser. The only thing is that you may need to get it approved by the TSO at your school. The next game that I have is a game called Deja. Now, it's a relatively new game. Again, it can be late primary, early secondary. It is currently available on for $25 via Apple's App Store or Google Play. This is something that I have also spent a lot of time playing. Kids really gravitate towards this. It's not complicated in the gameplay. It is hands on the screen to move around and to jump. I did connect it to both the New South Wales and the Victorian syllabus. So stage 3 for New South Wales and stage 4, and then level 7 and 8 for Victoria there. What I've also done with this game, and the premise of this game, should I say, is that you are trying to engage in cultural practice up in Cubby Cubby land, and you are learning about the dreaming stories, you are learning about culture, you are learning language. So I've also connected this to the 8 Aboriginal ways of learning. At Western Sydney University, where I'm teaching, I also teach the Aboriginal pedagogy units for our pre-service teachers. Now, really important is always the context. During gameplay, there is so much in this game, and this game was made for schools by Kerry Neal, who is a Cubby Cubby man, which is in the Moreton Bay area in southeast Queensland. And during gameplay, they are collecting all of the information that Kerry is providing. So this one does need internet connection because it does have short clips about some of the resources that they are referring to. But that is some of the data that they collect. After gameplay, there is also a written reflection task as well. So I have connected it to land links. I've connected it to community links, as well as symbols and images. Oh, there we go. And if you're not familiar with the 8 ways, there's a website there that I strongly suggest you check out. So this is some of the resources, some information on country. So depending on the year level you are teaching, they should already have a basic understanding of what country is, what its importance to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And it's also really important to actually show your students where country is located in comparison to where they are. And the Access language map is a really great map to do that. It is, again, available free online, and it's one of the only ones that you can really zoom in and zoom out of. So this is one of the worksheets that I've created for it. So this is the pre-game in worksheet 1. So explain how country is embedded within Dreamtime stories. And the lesson plan that I have is looking at the Dreamtime stories of the Cubby Cubby people, as well as suggesting you find your own from your local country. Again, there on the worksheet, I have the key words to use for ELAD students and students who need additional support. Also, the provision of an exit ticket. Now, during gameplay, again, this is one that should be played in pairs. So there are a number of words that are used from the Cubby Cubby language, and they also have the English translations. There are a number of characters in the game and their role. The main character is Bungan. He collects a number of plants, but they have particular uses, and there are a number of interactions that he has with animals, and those are pivotal to the storyline. So again, it is them collecting that data as they play the game. This is about thinking about the structure of the game. So what actually happens as they play. So this is something that they could do as an extension task. So it is, and of course you'd make those drawing boxes a bit bigger for them, but it is something that they could do to really understand how the gameplay aligns with the dream stories that the Dreamtime stories they're talking about. Afterwards, after gameplay, students are asked to write a game review. Now, this game review is meant to be focused on how the game focuses on country and how country needs to be cared for. There is another game that I refer to in this worksheet, which is a game called Never Alone. Some of you may have heard it or heard about it. It is about the Indigenous people in Alaska. It's a game made by them, and it is about a little girl who's battling the snowstorm with her little fox buddy. So I also provide an example of that as a game review. So exemplars and modelling is key to using not just games, but any text you have. The last game that I'm going to look at with you is called But You Seem Fine. This is, when we talk about games, this is a very different type of game. It is more of an interactive narrative. And again, this one is also available on itch and available for free. The beautiful thing about this game is that as you progress through, you start to learn more about the protagonist, but decisions are taken away from you. They're there, but they appear grayed out, meaning that there is this ability for students to really analyze the decision-making process within this game. And the purpose is this young girl is just chronically unwell and they cannot work out why, and the implications that has on not just her schooling, but also her friendships. So I've connected this to year 10, and the reason why I say year 10 is because you need an emotional maturity to play this game. Not that it is terribly depressing or upsetting, but to have that real sense of empathy. It is very much about those reading and viewing and listening to texts, but then that final task that they do at the end is composing a text. So before gameplay, you were talking about narratives and branching narratives. And what I do suggest in the lesson plans is that you get them, your students, to flick through some of those old choose your own adventure books. So whether it's those R.L. Stine ones or the old adventure books, and get them to have a play with that and to talk about the engaging interaction that people can have with branching narratives. During gameplay, again, there is a gameplay log. And then afterwards, students are going to create their own branching narrative on a platform called Twine. Now, Twine is free and available to use online. If they don't necessarily have a lot of access to technology, then they could write a branching narrative or they could create it themselves. So I've also got a bit of a how-to guide for how to use Twine. It is quite natural and easy to use, but it can take a little bit of practice at the start. This is one of the gameplay log worksheets, and the game itself is broken down into acts. So because depending on the actions that the students take, again, this could be done individually or it can be done in pairs or groups of 3. But it's for them to think about the choices they're making, the characters that are there. So especially in plot decisions, when did you need to make decisions? What were they? What did you choose and why? Getting them to think about music, getting them to think about the color, those game mechanics of not being able to actually select options, that they're there, but they can't select them. So the protagonist is wanting to get it to go out and go to school. There's 2 options: get up and go to school, stay in bed. Stay in bed is the only option you can pick. The other option is grayed out. So what does that say to the audience about the decisions that this student has or has not? This is then another worksheet that's created, which allows the students to create their own branching narrative, to think about the different paths that stories can take. They should also be thinking about how you can create emotion or emotional responses in the audience as a result of these different pathways and as a result of audience members being able to engage with the story. The last worksheet there, worksheet 5, is something called a devlog. For those who aren't overly familiar with the game development world, most game developers will create something called a development log, or devlog for short. Now, these are also available for you to use as teachers. If you find a game, look for the devlog, because that will give you a lot of insight into the creative choices, narrative choices, about why the developers did specific things. And this is what I've got the students to create here. It is for them to plan their own branching narrative game through Twine, but they're creating their own devlog. So they are documenting their justifications and their reasons. They're also thinking about potential problems and the solutions for it. So that is a really quick overview of digital game pedagogy. And what I hope that I've been able to provide is the pedagogical justification, the learning needs of students, the technology requirements, but also that you can use it just as a text. You can use it as a transmedia. That means that it is just like a book or a textbook. It is a text to use to tell part of the story or to help explain the context. So the next session that we will have will be a lot more interactive, as it is you thinking about some games and you thinking about how you can work it in. I will put you guys into breakout rooms, and I will also be available for consultation. I will also have, depending on the poll that you guys do today, I want to make sure that next week I have, or next fortnight, sorry, I have some specific case studies that I can tailor to the people who come along to provide clear examples. So you will also be able to ask me questions. You will be able to think about technology and so forth. And then in that last session, like we said before, it is that real workshopping again of how it's going to work in. Maybe you've gone to your head teacher and you've spoken to them. Maybe you've gone to exec. Maybe you've gone and found out about your technology requirements. It is a consultation period and an opportunity for you to work with your online colleagues and to even talk to your colleagues at school and see what their perceptions might be. So I will hand back to Christine.
So thank you everyone, and thank you especially Shea for sharing all these wonderful insights with us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Bye now.